Meera. My cab finally arrived at the hospital. I looked up at the imposing building. The well-balanced, bright building facade held so many emotions: joy, fear, pain, hope, and sorrow. It was impossible to predict all the stories contained within the hospital walls. Although I had been sitting in the cab for what seemed like a painfully long ride from the airport, my heart was beating fearfully. "I'll take your bags back to your house," Ashi promised, "and call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I can come immediately." I gave her a wobbly smile of gratitude before I ran into the hospital. At the reception area, it was everything I could do not to just shout out Nisha's name. But I knew how foolish that was. She was most likely on another floor, and I would have scared everyone with my behavior. I rushed to a reception desk. Although there was a line of people in front of me, they saw my agitation and waved me to the front of the line. Even strangers seemed aware of my urgency, and their compassion was not lost on me. When I gave Kabir's name, a young woman entered it into the computer and waved someone over. "Our volunteer here can take you there," she said, and said something to the elderly man. His eyes widened and he hurried around the counter. "Please come with me," he said, gesturing at me to follow him. I nodded my thanks to the woman and left with the volunteer. It was obvious that even though age had slowed down his body, he was trying to hurry. "I am sorry I'm going slowly," he apologized, "but I promise it will be easier to lead you there instead of giving you directions and sending you off to maybe get lost." "Thank you," I said, willing his aged body to move faster. "Is this a friend or a relative?" he asked. "A friend. A good friend," I responded as we rushed down the Brightway Hall. There was a fire at this cafe. I don't know much else except that he was rushed here and was going into surgery. "We have some of the finest doctors in the hospital," he promised. "Your friend is in very good hands, I know." We turned a corner and then went down another hallway. Before turning around another corner, he was right. I would have gotten lost for sure, and then I heard Nisha's voice. Turning quickly to the volunteer, I thanked him before I sprinted down the rest of the hallway. She was leaning heavily on Samarth, the assistant manager of the cafe, but started towards me as I ran. Nisha threw herself into my arms, crying, and I had to take a step back to catch myself. "What do you now?" "What do you know?" I asked. She pulled away, tears streaming down her face. "Nothing yet. He's in surgery right now. A nurse came out at one point and told me it would be several hours." "He's strong," I told Nisha. "He will be okay, I'm sure." She nodded and wiped at her tears almost angrily. "He will," Nisha said with an almost feral determination. I put my arm around her and we stepped out of the hallway into the surgical waiting room. I heard a pitiful whimper and realized Gianna was sitting in a chair, her eyes wide and her bottom lip trembling. "Oh, sweetheart," I cooed and swept her into my arms, hugging her tightly and burying my nose in her beautiful baby hair, drawing in her innocent smile like a medicine. "I came so fast I had to bring her with me," Nisha said. "She is scared to death." "We all are," I said, my mind hurting to see those innocent eyes, wide with confusion and fear. "I can call Ashi and have her come get by the baby," I offered. Gianna loved my assistant, and it felt wrong to have the baby here where the sights and sounds were probably terrifying her. Nisha breathed her relief. "That would be perfect. She won't mind?" My phone was already in my hand. "Of course not," I said. "She can take Gianna back to your apartment and get her settled in." The cab Ashi was in was only a few blocks away, and by the time I reached the main entrance with Gianna, she was rushing through the doors. "Thank you for coming back so quickly," I said. "I didn't even ask if you would mind." Ashi shook her head quickly. "Of course I don't mind. I'm glad to have something to do. And you know I love this little lady," she said, affectionately, gathering Gianna into her arms. I handed her Nisha's apartment key and gave her a few quick instructions before planting a final kiss on Gianna's head. "Your daddy will be fine," I told the baby, even though I knew she couldn't really understand me. Back in the waiting room, 1 hour pressed into 2 with no word on Kabir's condition, I sat stoically beside Nisha, not speaking, leaving her to her thoughts. I hoped there were good, pleasant memories with Kabir. My own mind was filled with prayers and unanswered questions. I was in the cafeteria getting some food for Nisha when I heard long strides rushing to me. Vivan, I said, running to his arms, the food items forgotten. I buried my head in his chest and felt his long arms wrap around my body. I felt reassured by his strength and allowed myself to finally start crying. Kabir, he said softly. I shook my head, then realizing he probably thought the worst. I managed to choke out the words, nothing yet. Before my fear took over again, I cried for the women in the waiting room, wrapped in her own cocoon of fear. I cried for the man who must have been agonizing pain, fighting for his life. I cried for their little girl who was hopefully sleeping by now, unaware what she might just lose her father. I cried and cried, balling Vivan's shirt in my fist. He in turn held me, whispering soothingly. I never heard the words, but I knew he was trying to take on some of my pain. Finally, as if a light was turned on, the tears stopped. I felt my spine straighten, and Vivan must have too, because his arms loosened, as if he were testing my strength, much like a parent tests their child's security when learning to swim. I pulled back, my face coated with countless tears running the back of his head. Across my cheeks, his eyes locked with mine. Okay now? He asked gently. I took a brave gulp past my swollen throat and nodded. Then I laughed nervously. Where did it come from? I said. I didn't mean to fall apart like that. Vivan hugged me again, resting his chin on the top of my head. I loved it when he did that. I'm guessing you have been very strong for Anisha. Haven't you? I guess so. I'm thinking you took a much needed break from being the strong one, Meera, he said, squeezing my shoulder reassuringly, even if you didn't want to. I barked out a laugh. No, I didn't want to. It's okay to cry, Meera, but about Kabir, he confirmed, we know nothing yet, right? I shook my hand. Then let's reinforce those walls for a little longer and go take care of Nisha. That is what Kabir would want. It is, I agreed, swiping at the last traces of tears. I knew my eyes were puffy and my nose was probably swollen, but the tears were gone. I took Vivan's hand, placing my fingers through his. Let's go back. Walking back to the cafeteria counter, I remembered to retrieve Nisha's pitiful meal. She didn't want me to go to the restaurant for her, I explained needlessly, holding up the dry crackers. Wait, he said, pulling me back quickly and led me over to a water dispenser. I think you need to slow down for a minute, have a drink. It'll help. I nodded gratefully and took several long healing gulps, feeling the cool water soothe my swollen throat. Together we walked back to where Nisha was sitting. Wrapped in her memories, she gave a sharp cry when she saw Vivan, but this time he rushed to her side. Standing back, my throat tightening once more. I imagined that I was watching a very similar scene that played out down the hall when he dissolved into his arms. When Nisha's torrent of tears subsided, the two sat down. Vivan holding her head tightly, I slid into the chair beside her. So we had our dear friend sandwich between us. What happened? Vivan asked. How could this happen? Nisha sniffled into her tissue and shook her head. I don't know, Vivan. They are still investigating. It was early and thankfully there were no customers in the cafe at that time. The other staff were in the restaurant area getting ready for the day, and Kabir was back in the kitchen. Suddenly they heard a horrible whoosh and Kabir shouted for them to get out. They turned back and could see the kitchen light up, but they never saw the fire. Kabir was only a few steps behind them and got out of the building quickly, but still he was there when the wire short-circuited, or whatever happened, and he was burned. How did he get out? Everyone left out the front door, but Kabir didn't follow right away. One of the staff was on his way back and when Kabir pushed through the door and fell to the ground. Did they say how bad he was burned? Vivan said. Had the courage to ask what I could not. Nisha shook her head. They didn't know. They said he sort of wrapped himself into a cocoon like he was protecting what was burned. His face and clothes were black from the smoke, so they really couldn't tell how badly he was burned. When the ambulance came, they loaded him up quickly and took off. He trailed off and the three of us sat back in our chairs, one united being giving and gathering strength from each other. Over Nisha's head, I caught Vivan's gaze and I gave him a brave smile. Whatever happened, we would face it together. My cheek was resting against Nisha's soft hair when the doctor finally came in, looking tired but positive. He didn't even have to say Nisha's name. She saw him, took in his surgical robes, and went rushing towards him. Kabir, she asked expectantly. Vivan and I both hurried her side, grasping her hands, maybe to keep her grounded or maybe to use them to ground us. I wasn't sure. The surgeon nodded, a weary smile on his face. He is alive and stable, he said to Nisha. Of course, when we go into a situation like this, we never really know how bad the injury is. Your husband had some serious damage, but he was also very lucky in that he instinctively pulled away from the fire. His quick reflexes preserved a lot of tissue that may have otherwise been even more seriously burned. Nisha let out a relieved cry. In response, we pulled at her, relieved and empowered at the same time. Where only a few minutes ago we were exhausted, we are all now rejuvenated and exhilarated. The burns are bad, though, he warned. We did have to take his undamaged skin and graft them onto the badly burned parts. His arms, necks and legs mostly. Misha sagged against me and moaned a little, but he will be okay. The surgeon responded with a serious tone. I am optimistic but cautious. The next few days are going to be very critical and he's extremely susceptible to infection, which could be critical. Can I see him? She asked. He's in recovery right now, so it will be a little longer. I will warn you, though, he is going to be in excruciating amount of pain and we will be keeping him heavily medicated for quite a while. He'll have to be in the hospital for at least a month as his burns heal and the skin starts to regenerate. When he's finally able to go home, his recovery will take several more months before he can return to any sort of work. Nisha nodded, tears streaming down her eyes. His cafe was destroyed, so he has nothing to go back to anyway. The surgeon nodded somberly. I heard and I'm very sorry. I have been to Cafe Kabir myself and will be missed. Fighting through her tears, Nisha's chin lifted with determination. But he's alive and that is all that matters. Yes, he responded, that is all that matters. Those words echoed in my mind like wind chimes in the breeze when we were finally able to see Kabir. The human body is an amazing thing, that it can take so much trauma and keep going. But a dear friend was at the mercy of the medical world, as he was hooked up to more machinery than what runs my car. Because of the risk of infection, Vivan and I had to stay outside and watched tentatively through a window as Nisha, clad in a yellow medical suit and a mask, went in to see him. Before she walked through the doors, when she first saw him wrapped in bandages in obvious pain, I saw a look of the sheer terror flash across her face, before she wiped it away and replaced it with the soft, loving look that was pure Nisha. Part of me felt like I was intruding on such a private moment, but I remembered her almost pleading request that we'll stay close for now. And to be honest, after everything that happened, after the horrible fears that had dogged us through the day, I needed to lay eyes on a dear friend. Catching Vivan's look of relief to see Kabir, even in this broken form, I knew he needed the same visual reassurance. She sat near him, speaking slowly, soothingly. I watched her reach out a tentative hand, wanting to touch him to ease his suffering, then she pulled back. Where could she touch him without causing more pain? Where was he not injured? Nisha turned sad eyes to us. I nodded, not knowing exactly what I was nodding for. Just reassurance, I guessed. We were there for her, Vivan and me, and we would be there by their side as long as they wanted us to there. Soon a nurse went to check on Kabir, ducking past us and then going into a small alcove to put a fresh hospital gown on. With fresh, germ-free clothing, the nurse checked Kabir's vital signs, making notes in his chart. She and Nisha exchanged some words. Although with the mask on, we had no idea what was being said. Finally, the nurse reached out, squeezed Nisha's shoulder, and left after shedding her disposable protection. How's he? I asked the nurse. He's holding his own, she said. He'll be very sleepy for several days. We are keeping him heavily sedated on purpose. His body needs to rest, and if he was awake, he would be in so much pain. He wouldn't be able to rest and heal. Has his wife eaten lately? She continued. I nodded. We were able to convince her to eat right before she went in to see Kabir. Good, the nurse said. She's going to need all the strength she has right now. She doesn't want to leave his side, and I can imagine I would be the same way if I was in that situation. She did tell me to let you know that you can go home if you want to, so you can get some rest. We've already talked about it. Vivan said I'm going to stay here in case Kabir Nisha needs me. I'll take a nap in the waiting room. He nodded toward the room a few steps away. The next time you go in, can you please let her know where I am? And I'm going to go back to their houses to take care of the baby and make more permanent arrangements when I come back. I'll bring a change of clothes for Nisha. Is there anything I can bring back for Kabir? The nurse pursed her lips and considered, does he have any favorite music? Anything that would give him a sense of connection to his old world. Vivan and I exchanged a look. I'm sure I can find some of his favorite CDs to bring back. That is a great idea, thank you. Of course, she said and turned to leave. I turned back to the window, waiting patiently until I caught Nisha's eye. With a few hand gestures, I let her know that Vivan would be staying and that I would be going to her apartment to help Ashi with the baby. In return, Nisha returned her own message of gratitude. I blew her a kiss and stepped away from the window. Giving Vivan a tight hug, I gathered my belongings and left my three best friends behind me, torn between a need to stay and the driving desire to escape the sterile environment, even if just for a little while.